All right, to continue on, we just mentioned the non-stock corporations, closely held, and then public held corporations. Just one more thing on the publicly held corporations. Anyone can purchase these stocks. So whenever a company goes public, that means that anyone can buy their stock into the company. So a few years back when Facebook went public, all their stocks were purchased immediately. When Twitter did it, same thing. So constantly, corporations are joining this a lot, giving the opportunity for investors to buy stock into their company. And we'll cover what stock is here in a little bit. Advantages of being a corporation. You're your own identity. When we hear Walmart, we can automatically know what that means. If a person is sued at the company, the entity or the corporation is what would get sued and not the individual. Contracts, sell stock, bonds, grow quickly, hire experts, become a definite existence. Corporation can exist forever and ever if properly maintained. As mentioned, corporations can give out stocks, and basically means you have ownership in a corporation. So let's say Apple had 1,000 stocks, and I buy one stock of Apple. That would mean I am 1/1,000th owner of Apple. So what sometimes companies will do or individuals will do, instead of buying up all the stock completely, they will just buy 51%. By owning 51% of a corporation, that means you have the highest share, so your voice means the most. You really get to make the decisions. Then we have a bond. Sometimes a company doesn't have any more stock available. They don't want to give out any more ownership of the corporation, so they can have a bond to raise money. And a bond is just basically a miniature loan that is given out by a corporation. So if you wanted to buy a bond with Target, you could buy the bond and then they would get your money. They would use the money to invest, and then hopefully it would grow Target, and then they would pay your money back, your IOU, with some interest. So that's the biggest difference between the two of them there. We have a stockholder. The stockholder is the owner of the corporation. They are the highest tier of owners in a corporation. Stakeholder is a little different. We will get to that in another slide here, but stakeholder. All right, corporate ladder. I'm going to jump right to this slide here. You will need to know this on your test. Plus, it's good to know how the corporate structure works. So at the very top of the corporate structure, this would be the stockholder. This would be the individuals responsible for the board of directors. They would be the ones to decide who would these professionals be that should run the corporation. And sometimes each year they will send out, or maybe it's every 4 years. It just depends on the corporation. They will send out a ballot, and then you could vote for your board of directors. And then also, if the company's not doing very well, you'll have the opportunity for these board of directors to be replaced. Next level is the board of directors. These are the ones that are really the brains behind a corporation. They're making the major decisions. They're appointing corporate officers. They are experts in what they do in their field in order to do this. If you've been watching any of the election lately, there is some people out there that are board of directors. For instance, Donald Trump, Ben Carson is another one, and there's a few more as well. They are experts in their fields, and what happens if corporations will usually bring on experts to help the company continue to grow. Romney, who was running for president a few years back, after he lost the second time, he was picked up by the Marriott, which is a hotel industry, because he's an expert. He's a really intelligent individual. Then we have corporate officers. This is your CEO, president, your big corporation, CIO, CFO. These are the ones that run the day-to-day their operations and how they run here. If we did that on a school setting, Mr. Lambert would be like the CEO, and then Mr. Atkinson would be like the president, who kind of runs the day-to-day operations, and then Mr. Lambert is the one then that is responsible for vision. And then the admin staff would be the different departments. And then we go to the bottom level, which is the manager and employee level. These are hired by corporate officers and put into various departments. So the manager at your store, If you have a part-time job, you work under a manager, this would be that level. This is where everyone begins, with a manager and employee. And when they talk about climbing the corporate ladder, this is it. This is the corporate ladder that we're talking about when it comes to this. And here's just some more information that basically we just covered right here. Okay, so corporate ladder. Disadvantages of a corporation. Well, first thing you have is a license to have a corporation in a certain state. If you wanted to open up a corporation, let's say it's in the state of Oregon, you have to have a certificate of incorporation, which then we could probably, if the state of Oregon agrees to your corporation, they then will give you the certificate, and then you can open a corporation there. Charter approved before production can begin, which basically means you can't operate your business there until you have the certificate. Now, other disadvantages, double taxation. So dividends. So dividends is the amount of money that the corporation has at the end of its quarter or at the end of the year that they will divide up amongst its stockholders. So let's say that, let's go with Apple again and the 1,000 stocks that are out there. Let's say they have $1,000 left over at the end of the year. Apple would send me $1 over their budget, which would be considered a dividend, and then I would get that money. But the taxation takes place as you get taxed on that dividend that's coming towards you. First, the corporation has to tax it, and then you get taxed on it again when you file for your taxes, which is really ridiculous because you're getting money that's already been taxed on more than once. Then we have capital gain. Capital gain is instead of the corporation giving dividends to an individual, they can invest it back into the company. And by doing this, they would grow as well. Capital gain also selling price higher than the purchasing price. This is where, I apologize, what I just said about putting the money back into the company, that's not capital gain. Capital gain is, let's say you buy a stock for $10, and then at the end of the year, it's worth $30. So you would sell that stock at $30, your capital gain would be $20 that you would earn. Again, silence for a minute. Hopefully you're picking up on this key idea that I'm giving you. Next one. More disadvantages of a corporation. Annual meetings with stockholders. These can sometimes be pretty nasty if a corporation is doing terrible. It happens often, especially when the economy is not doing well. These stockholder meetings can be quite difficult. If you've seen The Office, I usually show a video at this time about the shareholders meeting. Dunder Mifflin is about to go bankrupt, and now they have this stockholder meeting, and maybe we'll watch this at a different time, but that's what that is. The original owner can lose control. Once you go corporate, you are no longer the sole proprietor, so you can't make all your decisions. You can get fired, actually, by your own company. Does that ever happen? Yeah, it does. If you were to ask Steve Jobs while he was still alive, he was actually fired from Apple for a time. He was fired. Apple began to drop. Their company was failing. They brought him back in, and it's been successful ever since. But an owner can do it. George Zimmerman, if you know who he is the voice and was the starting owner of the Men's Warehouse. The guy that says, "You'll like the way you look," or something like that. He was fired as well, and he started the business. And then more regulation. There is lots of red tape for this, SEC reports. So usually a company, let's say it's Best Buy, will have its own division of lawyers, which then handle this part. So make sure everything is being done legal when it comes to this. So the SEC actually monitors to make sure that takes place. SEC stands for Securities and Exchange Commission, making sure things are being regulated properly. Now, if there was a loophole, it would be called an LLC, a limited liability corporation. This helps owners not have to pay corporate income tax. So I mentioned that my company that I have is an LLC, and that is correct. I do not have to pay corporate income tax. Also, an LLC protects me because now my company is a corporation, meaning it's an entity, and being an entity, if someone were to sue my company, they could only go after what I have for my corporation and not me personally. So not my house, not my car. They can have it with those graphics on it, but an LLC. All right, let's move a little faster. We got 2 slides left here. Now we have corporate combinations. This is where we have mergers. So we have something called the horizontal merger. And a horizontal merger is when 2 firms competed in the same market for the same good or service. So example would be, this would be like McDonald's and Burger King combined. This would be like Verizon Wireless and T-Mobile coming together. This would be like Coca-Cola and Pepsi becoming one. Horizontal merger, same markets, but now they're becoming more powerful. This would be a car company, General Motors, Honda. Then we have a vertical merger. Now, I forgot to mention that the horizontal mergers is you need permission by the government in order to do this because they don't want competition to be eliminated. So usually you need permission in order to do this. And we'll cover that in another section. Next one, we have a vertical merger. And this one here, this is where 2 more firms involved at different stages of a product. So kind of like you see at this graph right up top here, company C, company A, company P. Let's say that we are building cell phones, or let's stick with cell phones. So let's say that we are T-Mobile and we want to build our own phones. So let's say our phones are built in China, and what we could do is we could buy that manufacturer that makes our phones, and then let's say the letter A is how they let's say P is the manufacturer where they make the parts, and letter A is the assembler where they put it together, and letter C is the T-Mobile stores. If we owned every part of this, this would be a vertical merger. We'd have more opportunities here. Rockefeller, when he had his oil industry, he did just that. He owned the different parts, and by doing that, he could make things cheaper and more affordable and be more wealthy. And then we have a conglomerate. This is where there's no relationship whatsoever in the products. So this would be like Colgate toothpaste and Chick-fil-A coming together. Just no match whatsoever. This would be Bounty paper towel and Valvoline instant oil change. Yes, I put some thought into these, and I wrote these actually down because I thought they were good. So a conglomerate, no relationship whatsoever. If you've ever heard of Berkshire Hathaway, this is a conglomerate as well. That is owned by Warren Buffett, who owns several different corporations. He owns Heinz Ketchup, he owns Dairy Queen. He actually paid, I believe, cash for both of those. So he walked in, paid for cash right there. So those are some corporate mergers. Okay, I think I said 2 more slides. Now we have 2 more slides. Multinational corporation, an MNC. This is where a corporation is in more than one country. So as you can see here, there's multiple corporations in this where they're all around the world. So the Olympics is coming up. Coca-Cola would be all around the world. You'll see it all over the place. Pepsi's the same thing. Doesn't matter where you travel in the world, you'll see those 2 products. And then some are car companies here. Nissan, Honda, Toyota, all of those are from different countries. P&G, Procter & Gamble, is a corporation now, which we mentioned in Section 2. They have a corporation as well. So that's what multinational means. The largest nations with these would be the United States, France, Germany, Britain, Japan, and China. They have the most multinational corporations. And last slide. What are the advantages and disadvantages of a multinational? 1, advantage, create jobs, products around the world. Those companies that go into third world countries can really help those countries by offering jobs and products. Also, spread a new technology and production methods. So more products can be processed, be cheaper, and more affordable for people around the world. So definitely advantages there. Disadvantages, some countries do not want the influence for these multinational corporations. This is why North Korea would not allow any multinational corporations to go into it. They don't want the influence of the West or some of these more modern countries to influence them. Poor countries offer low wages and not many work condition restrictions. That is true. That is why a lot of companies go over to China because it's so cheap. Now, part of that is some of the minimum wage laws that we have in the United States and some of the regulations that are excessive. But at the same time, those poor countries, they can offer lower wages, and obviously there's a demand for it because there's people trying to work there. So if anything, it would help the GDP of these different countries. So a disadvantage, yes, lower wage, but at the same time it does provide jobs. And the last part of this, you want to make sure you write down and complete that and find out who said that quote. And that is the end of section 3. And make sure you get it done and answer the questions, the ones that are provided for this as well. If there's no questions, I may have not put the questions on there, so just make sure you're checking Classroom.